I guess maybe this is where we jump a little bit more to the broader roster and who K-State has brought in. CBS Sports had Nate Johnson, the MAC Player of the Year, ranked as the number 56 player in the portal. Abdi Bashir, the Monmouth transfer, number 71 in your guys' portal rankings. How do you kind of just see this overall roster meshing? What do you make of what K-State's done in the portal this offseason?
Yeah, I would say the backcourt just makes a little bit more sense because there's like differentiating strengths. I think for me on paper, Johnson is a sneaky huge ad because I think he's going to be their best perimeter defender. I think he's the guy that you put on, a Darren Peterson, or you put on, a Christian Anderson when you play Texas Tech, or Baylor when Obi Agbe comes into, like, he's that guy that's going to guard him. He's thick. He can really get over screens. He can fight through screens. He's switchable, so you could guard him on the big wings if you need him to. He is another one of those guards that really gets 2 feet in the paint. He really is trying, like, that's his game, and he can really, really put pressure on the basket. And I think that's something that Kansas State guards that do a good enough job at last year. Part of that was, multiple bigs on the floor at times that shoot it from three as well as you thought maybe Coleman Hawkins would. So maybe an extra defender was in the paint. But yeah, like, still, both of those two guards, Haggerty and Johnson, are those big physical guards that are constantly getting 2 feet in the paint and create advantages. I think that's where Bashir. I was scared about Bashir in the portal. He checks off a lot of boxes of a bust candidate when you talk about a guy who doesn't get to the rim, doesn't defend at a high level, and really relies on those threes going in. Like, that's a scary profile. But I think in this situation, it's a lot more manageable. I think they built a team that can cover up some of his flaws and doesn't necessarily need him to be like, a huge, high usage type of player. Because I'm a big fan of Kostic, or however you say his name, Andre Kostic, the freshman. I think he's going to be a big time player for them. And if Bashir's flaws are covered up by Johnson and Haggerty, I think he can be a more useful, helpful role player. If you were kind of asking me like, oh, Abdi Bashir's Kansas State's second best player this year, I think you're probably asking for, something scary to happen there.
Well, and I think that's where the significance of Haggerty comes in too, Isaac, is not only is it a huge addition, but it allows other guys to more slide into their roles that are more reasonable, right? I mean, totally. Nate Johnson was going to be K-State's best player, but I think he's better suited to be K-State's second or third best player, and getting a guy like Haggerty allows you to do that. And you mentioned getting to the rim, the free throw numbers that we talked about. I mean, I will throw in, PJ Haggerty and Nate Johnson combined to go 338 at 416 at the charity stripe last year. You just mentioned it. K-State's 5 lead guards combined for 274 attempts. So, in other words, Johnson and Haggerty combined to attempt 132 more free throws than K-State's 5 lead guards last season, and they made 128 more. And you could add Coleman Hawkins, who played more of the point forward, to those 5 guards. And still, K-State made 255 out of 352 at the line with him factored in. 6 guys, still 83 less than Haggerty and Johnson. And then getting to the rim, if you add Coleman Hawkins into the mix on top of those 5 lead guards, Isaac, K-State 210 of 408 on shots at the rim, which is 51%. You talk about Haggerty and Johnson taking a far greater percentage of their shots at the rim. K-State, those 6 guys, 408 of their nearly 1,500 shots came at the rim from those 6. In other words, only 27% of their total shots. These are 2 guys that you mentioned are going to get down the court, be heat-seeking. I think the word you use, heat-seeking missile, getting down the court. K-State seems like a team that's going to probably be able to be a good transition team this year as well, right?
Haggerty is like an auto instant raiser for your transition offense. Like, he's almost like a one-man fast break in that regard, where it's just like, I'm going. Like, you guys can come with me or not, but I'm going in transition, and I'm going to try to get to the basket. So, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of data, too, that would suggest that those transition threes are the most valuable shot in college basketball right now. The median average of college basketball teams shot 35% on transition threes last year. That's pretty good. So I like Bashir in those open court threes. I like the idea of Kostic in those open floor threes. I like Haggerty in those open floor threes, like pushing the ball, get the ball up, moving the ball like through the pass, not necessarily with a dribble up the floor, can create some of those really good looks before these defenses get set. Because, as we both know, getting the half court against some of these Big 12 defenses, good luck and best wishes, because it's one of the best scouted defensive leagues in the country.
A few more questions and we're going to get you out of here, Isaac. I guess, and this is a harder question to answer, and look, we don't know what the final roster is going to look like for K-State. We don't know what it's going to look like for a lot of Big 12 teams or teams across the country. KU still got spots to fill, so do others as well. But if we assume that Tyreek Smith gets his waiver and is on this roster next year, And Elias Repeat, a guy that we've been told is in the fold for Kansas State's roster, another European in addition to Kostic, if they have him too. What do you kind of see as the ceiling for this team, maybe relative to the Big 12 and maybe as well NCAA tournament hopes? And what's maybe the floor, which I imagine is, not making the postseason once again?
Yeah, no, I think that this team is a lot more high floor than last year's team. I just don't know how this team doesn't just be rock solid, like at worst, because Haggerty is just he's such a offensive elevator. Johnson makes a lot of sense there. Maybe one of Bashir Kostic hits at a decent rate and becomes a rock solid third guard you can trust. It makes sense. Now, I'm not really in on Marcus Johnson. He scares me. I think Kansas State would be in their best interest to not have him in their rotation. I just think there's a lot of flaws there defensively that's going to be exacerbated in the Big 12, especially as a rebounder as well, and just his body. So, if you can continue to add to this front court mix, if Tyreek gets healthy, if Kamari McGriff continues to elevate into what the type of player that they think they can be, they're not the biggest team in the front court. So maybe you have some concerns about, hey, how do with the meat and potatoes, how are we rebounding? How are we boxing out? What's that look like? But Tyreek Smith plus wingspan, McGriff plus wingspan to me on tape. I haven't seen a number for him. That kind of reminds me a little bit of that Houston type of build of those 6'8", 6'9" guys with really long wingspans that can kind of mitigate some of the, they're only 6'8", 6'9" type of deal. So I think for me in the Big 12, the top of the Big 12 is so top heavy. Texas Tech is going to be absolutely awesome. I think, BYU, Houston, those type of teams are going to be really good. I would throw Kansas State in that second tier of the Big 12 where it's hey, we have a chance to be a top 5 team in the league if everything breaks right. But I don't see this team missing the tournament. This just doesn't make sense to me if they would miss the tournament. So the floor is, we missed the tournament, things go wrong, Haggerty gets hurt, blah, blah, blah. But this team is not a high risk, high reward type of team, in my opinion. I think it's a really high floor team compared to last year. It's the good of Kansas State was as good as any team in the Big 12, and the bad of Kansas State was the worst team in the Big 12. I think this team's way more solid in that regard, and the peaks and valleys will be mitigated a lot more.